On November 18, 1974, Las Vegas shimmered like it always did, neon lights blazing against the desert sky, champagne glasses clinking in crowded showrooms, and legends walking through gilded corridors as if they owned the night. At the Sands, Dean Martin had just finished another effortless performance. The audience laughed on cue, swayed on cue, adored on cue. He made it look easy. He always did. But that night, something wasn't easy. As Dean walked the backstage hallway toward his dressing room, he heard it, deep, aching sobs echoing against the concrete walls. Not frustration, not temper, this was heartbreak, the kind that caves in a person's chest. He almost kept walking. In show business, privacy was sacred. Everyone had their silent collapses. You didn't intrude. But the crying didn't stop. Dean turned toward the small, auxiliary dressing room near the end of the corridor and knocked gently. "You okay in there?" Silence, then hurried movement, a familiar voice stripped of its sparkle. "I'm fine, just give me a minute." Dean knew that voice. The entire strip knew it. It belonged to Liberace. When the door finally opened, the contrast was jarring. Gone was the rhinestone royalty, no candelabras, no diamond-studded jacket, just a man with smeared mascara, trembling hands, and eyes swollen from tears. For a second, they just looked at each other. Two icons. Two opposites. One broken moment. Dean stepped inside and quietly shut the door. "What happened?" he asked, not as a celebrity, as a human being. On the dressing table lay a newspaper, crumpled like it had been crushed in anger. Dean picked it up. The headline dripped with insinuation. Rumors, accusations, attacks aimed straight at Liberace's identity, character, and dignity. It wasn't criticism of talent. It was an attempt to erase him. In 1974, whispers could destroy careers. Public opinion could close doors permanently. The article didn't just question Liberace's personal life, it mocked it. Dean read half a paragraph before tossing it into the trash. "Who wrote this garbage?" he muttered. Liberace's shoulders shook. "It doesn't matter. It's out there now. Everyone will see it. My fans, my family, what if they turn away?" For the first time in years, Liberace wasn't performing. He was afraid. Dean pulled a chair close and sat down. No jokes, no martini glass, just quiet presence. "Lee," he said softly, using his real name, "do you know what I see when I watch you perform?" Liberace wiped his face, unsure. "I see joy," Dean continued. "Real joy, and nobody writes hit pieces about joy unless they're jealous of it." The words landed slowly. Because coming from Dean Martin, the man who represented effortless masculinity and old-school cool, they meant something powerful. Liberace studied him carefully. "I always assumed you didn't approve." Dean raised an eyebrow. "Of what? Talent, hard work, making people happy." There was no sarcasm in his voice, only conviction. And something shifted in that small room. Liberace confessed that his manager had advised him to cancel shows. Lay low, avoid attention. Dean leaned back and shook his head. "If you disappear now, they win." The room went silent. Then Dean stood. "Tomorrow night you're going on that stage, and I'm sitting front row." Liberace blinked. "You don't have to." "I do." Dean's voice carried a quiet authority that rarely surfaced publicly. "And I won't be alone." The next evening at the Riviera, the audience buzzed with curiosity. Word had spread, quietly but deliberately. When Liberace stepped onto the stage, he nearly froze. Because seated in the front row were Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Don Rickles, Wayne Newton, and at the center, calm and steady, Dean Martin. It wasn't just support. It was a statement. The show that followed wasn't polished perfection. It was something better, raw, emotional, alive. Liberace played like a man reclaiming his space in the world. Every note thundered with defiance. Every flourish felt personal. Halfway through, he paused. He looked at the front row. His voice trembled. "Thank you for reminding me that music is louder than rumors." Dean stood first when the final chord echoed through the hall. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Not because of spectacle, because of courage. After that night, something changed. Dean and Liberace began meeting quietly after shows, late dinners away from cameras. No press, no gossip columns. Dean discovered that beneath the sequins was a fiercely disciplined musician who practiced endlessly. Liberace discovered that beneath the relaxed swagger was a man who carried self-doubt like a hidden weight. They talked about pressure, about expectations, about the loneliness of fame. Dean admitted something few ever heard. Everyone thinks I'm always calm. Truth is, sometimes I wonder if I'm just good at hiding fear. Liberace laughed softly. We're both performers, we just wear different costumes. Their friendship wasn't flashy. It was steady. And Vegas noticed. The Strip had always been competitive, territorial, protective of image, but Dean's public stance had shifted something cultural. Quietly, performers began showing up for each other more openly. Protection replaced gossip. Respect replaced distance. Years passed. The lights dimmed for both men eventually, as they do for all legends. When Liberace faced serious health challenges in the 1980s, Dean was one of the few people he trusted with the truth. He visited quietly. No announcements. No photographers. Sometimes he simply sat beside the bed. No jokes. No stage voice. Just presence. When Liberace passed away in 1987, Dean served as a pallbearer. During the memorial, he spoke words that stunned many who had never fully understood their bond. Lee taught me something, Dean said. Being different isn't weakness, it's courage and kindness that's stronger than cool. The room was silent. Because coming from the king of cool, that meant everything. Their friendship became part of Vegas legend, not because it was dramatic, but because it was human. Two men with different styles, different reputations, different audiences, who chose respect over assumption, compassion over image, loyalty over silence. And that night in 1974, when Dean Martin heard someone crying backstage and decided not to walk away, he did something far more powerful than deliver a perfect show. He showed up. By the mid-1980s, the lights of Las Vegas still glittered, but something had changed. The Strip was louder, younger, faster. New acts were rising. New faces filled the marquees. Yet behind one of the most recognizable names in entertainment, a private battle was unfolding. Liberace had always lived in brightness, candelabras, rhinestones, thunderous applause, but now the rooms were dimmer, the crowds thinner, the rehearsals shorter. Whispers had returned, not cruel like before, but curious, concerned. Only a small circle knew the truth. And in that circle stood Dean Martin. Dean didn't ask for explanations. He didn't demand details. One evening, when he received a quiet call asking if he could visit, he simply said, "Tell him I'm on my way." The hospital room was nothing like the dressing rooms of the Riviera. No mirrors surrounded by lights. No silk robes hanging nearby. Just a pale curtain, a soft mechanical hum, and a man who had once commanded entire arenas with a single piano chord. Liberace looked smaller. Not physically fragile, though he was that too, but stripped of the armor he had worn for decades. Dean pulled up a chair beside the bed. For several minutes, they said nothing. It wasn't awkward. It was real. Finally, Liberace smiled faintly. "You look terrible," he joked weakly. Dean smirked. "I've looked terrible for years, it's part of the charm." Even in illness, humor bridged the gap. But then Liberace's voice softened. "Dean, do you ever think about how strange it was, us becoming friends?" Dean leaned back. "Strange, sure, but the best things usually are." Liberace studied him carefully. "You didn't have to stand up for me back then. It would have been easier to stay neutral." Dean's jaw tightened slightly. "Neutral's comfortable," he said, "but it doesn't build anything, it doesn't protect anything either." The room fell quiet again. Outside, Vegas pulsed with music and money and spectacle. Inside, two men who had mastered the art of performance sat stripped of applause. Liberace's breathing grew heavier. "I was terrified that night, you know," he admitted. "Not just of losing work, of losing respect, of being alone." Dean didn't hesitate. "You weren't alone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was absolute." Over the following months, Dean visited often. Sometimes they talked about music, sometimes about family, sometimes about nothing at all. There were days Liberace slept through most of the visit. Dean would sit quietly, hat resting on his knee, simply being there. No cameras ever captured those moments. No headlines ever printed them. But they were the truest version of both men. Because loyalty isn't proven in front rows full of celebrities. It's proven in quiet rooms where nobody's watching. The final goodbye. When Liberace passed in 1987, the world reacted in waves: shock, grief, reflection. Tributes poured in. Audiences replayed memories of dazzling performances. The Strip dimmed its lights in respect. At the memorial service, the church overflowed. Performers, musicians, old friends, industry executives. And near the front stood Dean. Not as the king of cool. Not as a legend. Just as a friend. When it was time to speak, the room expected a polished tribute, maybe a clever remark to lighten the mood. Instead, Dean's voice carried something deeper. "Lee taught me something I didn't expect to learn," he said slowly. "He taught me that being different takes strength most people don't have." He stood on stages and let the world see him exactly as he was. He paused, swallowing hard. And he reminded me that kindness lasts longer than applause. The room was still, because everyone understood something in that moment. Their friendship hadn't just been unusual. It had been necessary. For both of them. Dean had once been known for effortless cool, for detachment, for never letting the world see what rattled him. But standing there, honoring his friend, there was no distance, no mask. Just respect. The legacy that shocked Vegas. In the years that followed, their story traveled through backstage hallways and rehearsal rooms across Las Vegas. Young performers heard it as almost folklore. The night Dean Martin walked toward a sound most people would have ignored. The night he chose compassion over comfort. The night a friendship formed that quietly shifted how entertainers treated one another. Vegas can be ruthless. It can celebrate you one night and replace you the next. But within that glittering machine, something human had taken root because one man knocked on a door instead of walking past it. And that became the lasting lesson. Not about fame, not about headlines, but about presence. Because in a city built on spotlight, the most powerful thing Dean Martin ever did for Liberace happened in the shadows. He stayed.